Ahora sí, buen día con todos. Creo que estamos todos los que teníamos que estar en la sala. Como les comentaba a nuestros concurrentes locales, esta presentación va a ser en inglés. Nuestros invitados son invitados muy importantes del extranjero. La certificación que ya es parte del portafolio de certificaciones internacionales con la que trabaja el GBC Perú. Está conformada hoy en día por Global Network for Zero como una de las más importantes certificaciones globales que se acaba de incorporar al portafolio de certificaciones del GBC Perú. Muchas gracias César, Francesca, Francisco, Jorge Juan por estar presentes y a nuestros invitados internacionales. Como les comentaba, la presentación va a ser en inglés, entonces voy a comenzar presentando a nuestros invitados. Thanks for having here you today, Mahesh and Srijani. And sorry for my worst, words, and that's I'm not habituated with these names, but my pleasure for having you here today for this webinar, for this special webinar with our international specialists in Global Network for Zero. Mahesh is a prominent professional in sustainability. He worked in World GBC for many years, and in US GBC. He is so well known all over the world, so we are very pleased to have him here with his top specialist in this certification. So, Mahesh, the room is for you, and please present for our professionals here in Peru. Again, very pleased to have you here, and this is the first but not the last time we are having you in these technical webinars. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. And Peru GBC is not new to me, right? I mean, we have been connected with Peru GBC for a very long time. And I am very, very pleased to be connecting with all the sustainability leaders in the Peru region who are driving climate and economic transformation into this beautiful country. And I'm happy to connect through this medium. And so thank you so much, Lucas Sarmiento, and your incredible hardworking team. You know, we love your team. They continue to support us in a great way, and we are always committed to supporting you and your team, and most importantly, your members. So, and our pride is in having you as a strategic partner as we work toward net zero Peru. And I also want to extend my thanks to my good old friend, GNFC advisor Hector Miranda, who has been a great supporter and advocate for sustainability. Last time I was in Peru, he actually was very generous in taking me all around Lima, Peru, also Machu Picchu, and all the wonderful place. And now he's helping us do the acceleration with the net zero. So incredible support from Peru for our mission, which is zero emissions for all. Now, while many of you may know me already, but still for the benefit of people who have joined me newly today, my name is Mahesh Ramanujam. I have been the president and CEO of US Green Building Council before founding Global Network for Zero, where along with my partner, Sarah Merricks, I'm serving as part of the leadership team. I'm serving as the president and CEO of Global Network for Zero. We shortly call it GNFC. And we established GNFC in 2021 to help accelerate the transition to a zero emissions world and to empower people and organizations to take meaningful, measurable climate action. That sounds like a lot, but in short, that is what we have to do to get to a zero emissions world. Now, when I was with the USGBC, the creators of LEAD, I was very proud to join USGBC when LEAD was in 35 countries. And by that time I left, we were at about 200 countries and territories. And it was from that position where I witnessed extraordinary local leadership in South American market, and especially here in Peru. You know, the good amount of work that has been done in that market is impressive, because despite all the hard challenges that you have faced, you always try to make that continuous improvement. and most importantly, enable the process on the ground so that we can actually arrive there. While I am tremendously proud of the expansion of LEAD, which continue to be proud of, it's making great progress. Our work to create LEAD version 4.1 and then to build the foundation and roadmap for LEAD version 5, all of it, I'm so proud because I had this wonderful opportunity to work with you guys, with all of you, and most importantly, remove many barriers to drive market transformation by meeting markets and people where they were, and working to make LEAD not only a global system, but a national, regional, and local rating system. So, and I was very proud to carry that LEAD flag, and I continue to champion and support LEAD all around. Now, together, what we have done is we have built trust, we have transformed communities, and proved that buildings can give back more than they take. My motto was, we are all in, and at GNFC, that still drives everything we do. So today, I won't spend a lot of time talking about why green building matters. I believe that's a conversation of the past decade, and I believe that you fundamentally know all of this. Instead, I want to talk about what's next. And what's next is rapid decarbonization at scale. And the key word is net zero. Now, this is why it's important. Here is where we stand globally with net zero. Only 0.023% of buildings globally are net zero. Net zero buildings are projected to grow 29% annually through 2027. But we are facing a 70% shortfall in the number of low carbon buildings needed. And investor and tenant demand is rising fast. In some part of the world, it is already well ahead of the curve. In some part of the world, it's catching up. So that demand is there, and that demand is to be taken. But that is for a low carbon building. And reaching net zero by 2050 will require the buildings and construction industry to decarbonize 3 times faster over the next 30 years versus the previous 30. So we have to do a lot more hard work in the next 30 years to basically be able to realize the Paris Agreement goals. Now, that last ad is very daunting, but the growth projects and market demand from the second and third stat show the business case. The business case is there. And that's why I believe that a net zero world by 2050 is within reach. And my preference is we do it by 2040. And that's what we are here to talk about today. Obviously, the next frontier is clear: designing, constructing, and retrofitting buildings to address scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. Today, we will explore how Peru, in particular, can lead this transition, and how GNFC helps remove barriers, and how companies like yours, organizations like yours, are already paving the way. We are already doing good work. We just need to ramp it up. Peru's climate crisis underscores the urgent need for both adaptation and global decarbonization. You know this much more than I do. With less than 5 years to meet the Paris Agreement's target, most net zero pledges are behind schedule. But the UN says 1.5 degrees Celsius is still achievable if we move faster. Of course, buildings are central to that transition, especially here in Peru, where 80% of the population now lives in the urban area, a dramatic shift from 1960, when most lived in rural areas. This ongoing shift creates both urgent challenges and opportunities for better planning, infrastructure investment, and sustainable development. Now, let's take it a little bit broader. Every country in South America has ratified the Paris Agreement, and many are stepping up their mitigation efforts. The widespread acknowledgement of the impact of climate change has been recognized across the region. A decade ago, you are familiar with this, Peru enacted the Technical Code of Sustainable Construction, requiring new public and private buildings to meet standards for energy efficiency, water savings, solar water heating, and use of climate-appropriate materials. A sustainable building code followed, then establishing mandatory minimum standards for energy and water performance in new residential and commercial construction in major cities. In 2018, the Framework Law on Climate Change mainstreamed climate action into all levels of government planning, establishing a national greenhouse gas inventory, and required climate risk integration in public investments. A lot of good work has happened over a period of a decade and a half. And also, Peru's NDC target is about 30% emissions reduction by 2030, with potential to reach 40% with international support, and aiming to neutralize greenhouse emissions by 2050, which I call it as a great goal. And obviously, this is guided by a national climate change strategy to 2050, which provides a framework for coordinated efforts across sectors, not just the building sector, but as we all know that the building sector touches many sectors, and we can achieve all of it through this mission. Now, the 2050 strategy has 4 objectives. First, decarbonizing energy, renewables, efficiency, and electrification. Then sustainable agriculture and forestry, which includes deforestation reduction. Third, resilient infrastructure, especially in water and coastal systems. And last but not the least, circular economy approaches in industry and waste management. Now, Peru has also set national targets for CO2 reduction and energy use reduction from buildings. The updated 2021 Technical Code for Sustainable Construction aims to reduce water consumption in buildings by 30 to 40% and energy consumption by 30 to 50% by 2030, which is just 5 years from now, and also has put in place specific strategies to reduce energy, water, and embodied carbon. Now, these included energy efficiency requirements, obviously, for lighting appliances, HVAC in new buildings, thermal insulation and passive design standards to reduce heating and cooling needs, especially in high altitude cities, water efficiency measures, obviously the obvious ones, low flow fixtures, rainwater harvesting to reduce not only the water consumption, but also to reduce energy used for pumping and water treatment, and sustainable materials. It's all about lowering the embodied carbon and promotion of locally sourced inputs. And also, I would say, economy. These directly cut building-related emissions, which account for a large share of Peru's electricity use. So now, it's important to note that while Peru has no national green building mandate, many municipalities, as Lucas was mentioning earlier, encourage certifications like LEED, EDGE, and BREEAM, often with density bonuses. Now, like many countries, climate leadership is often tested by cities. Lima was the first Latin American capital to endorse a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty in 2022. Lima also has a local climate change law, which includes 144 mitigation, adaptation, and governance actions that seek to reduce GHG emissions by 30% until 2030 and increase local resilience and improve the city's capacities to adapt to climate-related hazards. That's a lot. Now, Peru has a pathway to net zero in the building sector through its multiple strategies than one national mandate. There are many ways to get there. And this mirrors the global challenge. What's needed is a roadmap to address national, regional, and local short, mid, and long-term decarbonization targets at all levels, grounded in accurate carbon accounting and replicable strategies that inspire confidence and action. Now, in all of it, you'll see there is one common theme. It's all about accounting for carbon and then deploying strategies to move forward. So, of course, in addition to this roadmap, Peru needs ambition, drive, and energy to create that momentum. And that momentum must come from you. We cannot rely on solutions from 30 years ago or settle for doing less harm. Less harm is no good. We have to do more good. We must build resilience that future-proofs our cities, ecosystems, businesses, and way of life. Now, as we look at this, the transition to net zero is already separating leaders from the laggards. The good news is that there are organizations out there who can help, but have put in place an incremental plan to achieve net zero that is based on sound financial returns that are both a business and climate imperative. The only question is, are you ready to be a part of it? Now, since we have set the stage, I want to talk about what we are doing to support this transition at GNFC. We have created a platform, a certification program designed to meet this moment. Our goal is simple: make net zero accessible, practical, and measurable for any buildings or business anywhere. Now, we support buildings, portfolios, and organizations with a full suite of certification programs and a global network of experts providing support. Of course, that includes you as you join the network. Your expertise will be shared with the rest of the world, not just with only the Peru community, and a supportive community of climate leaders working to accelerate decarbonization efforts toward a zero emissions future. And our framework is grounded in years of market insights and global best practices, and is built to simplify net zero implementation by eliminating the complexity and cost that hold many projects back. Now, one of the biggest challenges we see, buildings and businesses lack credible net zero transition plans. There are a lot of commitments, but we are very light on the plans. So, because of that, implementation is slow, and the leaders don't have the data to make the business case. And that's what we have set out to fix. Our approach is called a zero to zero approach. What we are trying to do is keeping it simple, right? If people have not gotten started on zero, we want to help them get started on the net zero certification. And if they have done many things like EDGE, LEED, BREEAM, whatever practices and strategies that they have done to actually decarbonize their asset already, we want to help them close that gap, move that LEED Platinum building to a net zero building and a GNFC certified net zero building. That's our mission. And how are we doing that? By tackling a very simple principle of tackling scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. And the best place is that our methodology allows you to transition not only the buildings, but also to actually impact the business operations within those buildings. We can talk a little bit more about that as we go through this process. Now, we offer 3 certification options for buildings, portfolios, and businesses. Our net zero certification for buildings provides a framework to demonstrate that buildings are designed, constructed, and operated in net zero by removing scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions and helping them generate more energy than they consume, reduce more emissions than they actually generate, save more water than they use, and most importantly, reduce waste and have a positive impact on the physical, mental, and social health of occupants. Now, we offer 4 categories with 3 certifications for each. We define net zero emissions as a building balancing its total scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions with equivalent emissions removed or offset. So you may ask yourself, how do we calculate this? So of course, that's why we have Sri Ranjani on the call. We'll cover this during the demo. But for scope 1, we look at fuel sources and their consumptions, the consumption of refrigerants, and fuel consumption of vehicles owned or controlled by the reporting organization. For scope 2, we look at buildings' annual consumption from these sources. And for scope 3, we look at indirect downstream activities, including the 15 categories outlined here. Generally, for the building sector, we have seen 3 or 4 categories only are applicable, but we keep these 15 categories so that it gives you the opportunity to think about what's next. Now, our next category is energy. We define net zero energy as a building generating renewable energy on-site or off-site, equal to its annual energy consumption, resulting in the mitigation of scope 1 and 2 emissions and zero net energy drawn from the grid. Now, we believe this is the best place for most of the building projects to start. Emissions could be the second play, but the most important part here is that if you're already well ahead of your energy efficiency journey, then net zero energy should be within your reach. And there is a pragmatic plan that you can draw and you can get recognized for it. And of course, the last 2 categories impact things beyond scope emissions, which is, we talked about water earlier. So we have the net zero water, which is defined as a building balancing its total water consumption with an equivalent amount of water replenished on-site or through alternate sources, I should say. And net zero waste is defined as a building that aims to eliminate waste generation by maximizing recycling, composting, and other diversion strategies to achieve zero waste sent to the landfill. Let us not forget the redesign is also part of the mix. Now, projects can technically earn a net zero design certification by showing that how they are actually designing for net zero operations. They can obtain net zero construction certification by actually showing that how their construction is enabling a net zero operations. And of course, a net zero operation certification to demonstrate that you are actually having a net zero operation. Now, what makes us unique? First, our certification is built on the most obvious, most widely democratized, widely used, very practical framework called the GHG protocol. And it allows us to measure scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions with a set boundary. That makes everything easy. And it also makes it easy to have pure accounting and data. So unlike traditional certification programs where emissions data are obscured, we don't need to any longer chase points. We don't need to work on strategies that are not directly deriving value to the projects or value to the asset, but instead we focus on quantification of emissions and doing all about reducing them so that we can bring this entire asset to a zero goal. And this approach, we believe, enables clients to access, quantify, and extract emissions data for compliance, and also complement initiatives such as SBTi, GRI, and even GRESP. Second, unlike most green building programs, there are no prerequisites. We have removed every barrier. Why? Because that's what all these buildings need. They need flexibility, but not at the cost of rigor. They need absolutely opportunity to innovate, but not at the cost of compromising the outcome. We are very clear. We have to demonstrate that scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 emissions are tracked, reduced, and set to zero. That's a very lofty goal. But how do you get there? What are the ways that you can effectively get there is the challenge that we will pose to the market. And the good news is that there is enough learning and education out there. It is all about really focusing on that outcome and delivering it. Now, third, we are very laser focused on emissions. So we try to really, in the post-COVID world, we made a commitment that if we are going to achieve something before our generation is over, at least for me personally, I would say before my generation is over, I want to see a zero emissions world. That's why we are not focused on point accumulation. We are trying to focus on empowering asset owners and project teams to implement the most cost-effective ways to cut emissions without chasing strategies that don't translate into emissions reduction. And most importantly, help clients optimize their investments, increase efficiency, and reach their targets faster. So it's all about focusing on that big goal of zero and making it achievable. Fourth, our platform supports compliance, as I mentioned earlier, future planning and reporting. And most importantly, we can report to any type of framework that already exists, like the SBTi, GRI, GRESB, but also any future framework that are coming in. Because our foundation is very simple. It's greenhouse gas protocol, and we are tackling scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. That's a critical ingredient for all these programs. And fifth is that GNFG certification is unique because it addresses all 3 scopes and has an unparalleled focus on scope 3 compared to others. Why? Because we have to get started on it. We may not tackle all the scope 3 challenges today, but we must tackle on it. We must focus on it today because eventually in 4 or 5 years, we will develop strategies and smartness to be able to get there. And lastly, because we follow the guidelines of the GHG protocol, our certifications more accurately account for embodied emissions. Our design certification assesses embodied emissions from building materials, and then our construction certification assesses embodied emissions from building materials, processes, and emissions due to electricity, fuel, and more consumed exclusively during the construction process. And our operation certification assesses embodied emissions from building materials or equipment used during major retrofitting or end-of-life replacement during the baseline year considered. So this is especially critical because embodied emissions are becoming an increasingly important concept and a construct and a leverage that we can use in the green building design and construction phase. They account for 11% of global carbon emissions. And as buildings become more energy efficient and their operation footprints decrease, this percentage is only expected to grow. So from the design to construction to operations, we must account for embodied carbon at every stage. And that's what our program tries to do. Now, GNFC's net zero certification for portfolios allows you to create a roadmap and plan to transition your full portfolio of buildings to net zero. Either you can get certification done at a portfolio level, or you can go asset by asset and create your portfolio level execution. The good news is that all 4 categories apply. Emissions, energy, water, and waste categories applies to the portfolio also. Whatever you can do with the asset is also applicable to the portfolio. And then lastly, GNFC offers a structured stepwise pathway for businesses to reach net zero while aligning with international standards. This is our unique value proposition. When you get started with a building, you start focusing on 2 more things inside those buildings. One, the people inside it. So every emissions reduction effort, every effort to make energy to zero, and every effort to save water, avoid landfills is going to have a positive impact on the people inside those buildings. The second, how do we make those businesses inside those buildings thrive and prosper? And how do we drive their economic advantage or reduce their long-term compliance risk to climate action? So our program is well designed to actually be able to scale to that aspiration, scale to that practicality, scale to that need of being able to make that nexus from buildings to businesses. So our framework clearly simplifies the process with clear and actionable steps from setting baselines, conducting assessments, and also implementing robust mitigation strategies, of course, partnering with all of you great implementers out there, and fostering continuous improvement, because that's what businesses do best. Businesses continuously improve to get to a greater goal, to build a better brand, and most importantly, have a positive impact on the societies that they are part of. So that is exactly what our program is designed to do. So by adopting our framework, businesses can achieve not only regulatory compliance, operational efficiencies, but build a long-term sustainability leadership. So again, same theme prevails. The same certification is applied at 4 categories: energy, water, waste, and emissions. We kept it simple. And that's pretty much it from my side. So thank you for the opportunity again, Lucas and Peru GBC, for giving me this wonderful opportunity to reconnect, share what we are doing, get excited for greater goals that we can achieve for Peru, and most importantly, partner together to set a benchmark for the world to know that net zero is within reach. With that, I will hand it off to my colleague Sri Ranjani to quickly help you walk through the platform and kind of contextualize some of the things that I've mentioned at this point. Thank you very much, Lucas, and thanks everybody for listening.
Thanks, Mahesh. and very excited about all the information. These are really good news for us. Edge is one of the first certifications that leads us to net zero, as in documents. But I see all the information you gave us, and it's very specific and very focused about how to get net zero in a very specific way. So let's have the precise explanation of how it works, like a toolkit with Ezra. She is the specialist in this certification. So the webinar is yours. Please, thank you for your participation today, and I'm pleased to have you here only virtually in Peru.
Thank you so much for that, Lucas. So I guess my screen is visible. I'm going to present to you the tool that we have, which would help you in the certification process. So what you see on the screen right now is the login interface to our platform. If you are a first-time user, you can go ahead and sign up right here. It's a very simple sign-up process, but I'm just going to be signing in right here. And what you will see as soon as I sign in is a whole list of projects that I have been working on. But when you log in for the first time, this is what you will see. It will ask you what is the net zero certification that you are looking to pursue. As you're aware, we've launched this for buildings. It's possible for you to pursue the certification for portfolios as well as businesses. And for the ace of today's demo, I will walk you through a project which is part of the buildings interface. So let's start by looking at the project Alpha Tower 3310. As soon as you start a project, you would see the overview tab. This is where you take control of your project for its submission towards the certification. We will come back to this in a while. We'll start instead with the basic info. And as the name suggests, this is where you provide all of the basic information about your project by telling us the building title, the occupancy category, the target certification area. You can geolocate your project. All of this is very simple. What's interesting is this particular question, which will ask you if this building is a part of. So let's say the project that you're working on is not a standalone, but rather it's an asset that belongs to a larger portfolio, or perhaps it's a building that's part of a larger campus. Then you have the opportunity to tag this to the larger entity. That's what I've done right here. You can then go on to tell us if you'd like to keep your project data confidential and also upload photographs and videos of the project as well. The next part is where you onboard all of the team that is going to be helping in the decarbonization journey. This will include the in-house sustainability team, the facility management team, perhaps the consulting partner who would help in the whole process, maybe even your HVAC and MEP consultants. So just about everyone who will help in decarbonizing the operations of the project can be brought in right here. The next tab, which is the assessment, this is the most critical part of the certification program. As we mentioned earlier, our certification is based on the GHG protocol, which is going to help you calculate your emissions under scope 1, 2, and 3. You would start the assessment by mentioning the reporting period, which we suggest to be 12 consecutive months. This is to ensure we take into account all of the changes that happens in the operations because of change in the seasons. You can report for multiple years. So for this project, you can see that there is data available for 5 different years, and you also have the flexibility to choose your own baseline. Moving on to the assessment itself, let's start with scope 1. Now, under scope 1 is where there are 3 questions. The first question is on fuel consumption or stationary combustions. The second question is refrigerant fugitives. And the third question is mobile combustions. We'll start with the first question here. You would be starting with an empty row. Clicking under the type of fuel, you can see that there's a whole drop-down list of solid, liquid, gaseous, and biofuels as well. Let's pick one from this. So the minute I pick the fuel, you can see that there is an emission factor that appears from our database. And all that you'll now be required to enter is the consumption. And there you have the emissions computed immediately. So the emission factors in our database are from reputed sources such as US EPA, DEFRA, IPCC's Assessment Report 6, and any other region-specific emission factors that are publicly available. But let's say for your project, there's a more market-specific or perhaps even a site-specific emission factor, then you have the flexibility to edit this right here. Let's do that. Now, the minute I edit the emission factor, you can see that there is an icon that appears, and hovering over this, it will give you the default value from our database, and you can always compare it with a more market-specific emission factor that you have now entered. We can look at one more calculation. Let's look at refrigerant fugitives. So here again, you would be starting with an empty row. Clicking under the type of refrigerant, you can see a whole drop-down list that you can pick from. Let's click one. So you can see the emission factor appears immediately, and all that you'll now be entering is the consumption. And there you have your emissions computed immediately. So this is how all of our calculations work. Moving on to scope 2. This is where you account for the energy consumption in your project. This would include the non-renewable electricity in your that you're purchasing from the grid. If you have renewable energy that you are generating on-site, or perhaps procuring it from an off-site source, you can include all of that right here under scope 2. Now, scope 3 is where it gets a little more interesting. You will see that there are 14 different categories under which it's possible to capture data. And depending on the typology of the project, the materiality of what gets captured under scope 3 varies. So for this particular project, which is a commercial office tower, you can see that there is some data captured under waste disposal. This is basically the waste that has been sent to the landfill. There's also data on waste incinerated, as well as employee commute. At the end of this, we have a summary of scope emissions. This is basically a summation of your scope 1, 2, and 3. You can then go on to tell us if there are any best practices or standards that you are looking to implement in your project. This again is available as a whole drop-down list that you can pick from. Feel free to type and tag as well. The next part is where you can upload all the documents that will help in substantiating the data that you have provided in the assessment. This would include bills, invoices, BMS readings, documents where you are showcasing a particular methodology that you might have used in calculation or quantification for your assessment. And of course, if you have edited the emission factor for any of the inventories, it is also required that you submit the source document for that emission factor, because all of this is what will help in the whole validation process towards the certification. The next tab is Net Zero Plan. So what's happened is you've completed the assessment. You know where the project stands in terms of its emissions, and it's now going to be important to prepare a decarbonization roadmap. This is a narrative document that you prepare in collaboration between the project team and the sustainability partner. It will talk about the various strategies that you're going to be implementing to get your project to net zero, the timeline by when you want to achieve that goal. And of course, if you are looking to purchase carbon offsets to perhaps address your residual emissions, all of that gets included in the net zero plan, and the same can be uploaded right here. The next tab is carbon offsets. where, like I mentioned, if you are purchasing carbon offsets at some point, you can come back and report that purchase right here by mentioning what is the planned purchase, what is the actual purchase of the carbon offset, and of course, a cumulative of the actual purchase is taken into account for the final calculation. The next tab is net zero milestones. So what's happened is, you've assessed, you've strategized a decarbonization roadmap, and you're going to be implementing these strategies on site, which would ultimately result in the reduction of your emissions over a period of time. So you can come back and report that reduction right here by mentioning what is the planned reduction, what is the actual reduction that has occurred, and of course, a cumulative of the actual reduction is taken into account for the final calculation. The next tab here is a summary of emissions. So here again, you will see all your numbers right from the assessment up until your net zero milestone. So here you can see your scope 1, 2, and 3 and a summation of that from your baseline period. And then if there have been any carbon offset purchases, that gets accounted for. Any reduction in your emissions through the implementation of strategies, that gets accounted for as well. And the final number that you see is now the emissions that the project has to avoid to get to net zero. This summary of emissions is available as a spreadsheet or a PDF that can be downloaded. It's also available as a link that can be copied and shared within your team. The final tab here is project files, where all the documents and images that you are uploading in the various tabs gets centrally stored here for easy access. Now let's go back to the overview tab. Like I said, this is where you take control of your project for the submission. You can see that I have already said we have completed the building and the team information. Now that we've also completed the assessment, let's go ahead and submit this for a review. So the minute I click next, there's a payment gateway that will open, following which you'll be able to submit your project for an independent third-party validation. Now, I will also walk you through a project that's gone through this whole validation process. This is Alpha Office 1110. And from the overview tab, you can see that the project has already achieved 2 certificates, namely the assessment and the net zero plan. So what happens is the minute you submit your project for a review, like I said, there's an independent third-party reviewer who would be brought on board. And there's a very transparent interaction that will happen between the project team and the reviewer. All of this gets recorded right here under the comments. So here you can see that some questions have been raised. These queries are addressed by the project team in real time. So it's not a faceless review. And documents have been shared to address these queries. At the end of this, when all questions and queries have been addressed, the reviewer will recommend the project for the certificate, at which point GNFZ will approve the certificate, and it's made available right here at the Overview tab. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. We're happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thanks, Srijani. Please, all the people in the webinar can make their questions in our chat, and we'll be pleased to answer all the questions. I have some specific questions for you both. What do you think is the principal advantage of net zero certification in comparison with the Edge net zero platform? What is your first impressions about a comparison between this platform and the Edge net zero proposal?
Yeah, and the Edge Basic and the Edge Advanced, both of them are focusing on achieving certain minimums, right? Minimum 20, 20, 20. And then they actually allow you to tackle across 3 categories and move up. In our case, we don't have any such restrictions. As I mentioned during my call, we don't have any prerequisites. Our methodology is saying, go straight to emissions, calculate your emissions, create a plan. From that plan, track your implementation, go to the next level. And we recognize that it will be a continuous effort for quite some time. So if you have already done edge, we will consider edge as part of our starting point. That is the best part. Our key difference is that if edge is there, edge basic or edge advanced, both of them are there. Both of them can be recognized by us as something that you've already done. And if you're able to put the data into the system, we can recognize and move this forward. So we are more complementary. I would not say that we are not, generally, I don't like to think of this as comparison, but more understanding the differences. And then in that edge particular case, we will take edge beyond what edge is today thinking. Edge is only thinking up to 20% or 40%. We can start from that 40% to go to the 100%. That's our primary thing. And second thing, there is the edge tool is basically primarily is giving an estimate, giving you more on the design and construction side. I think we can enhance that by putting a lens of operations on it. And that will allow you to think about how your building will operate during operations as well, so that it becomes super complementary. So those are our perspectives.
Thanks, Mahesh. And another question is about the verification process. You have specific verifiers, regional verifiers for specific markets. How do you work with this topic?
Currently, that is why we are partnering with you. One of the reasons we are partnering with you is because to build that regionalization, right? Because we can't bring everything from America. We cannot bring everything from India or China or whatever. So the vision is global. The implementation is local, which means the regionalization is very, very critical. So one of the requests on this call, we have 3 requests on this call. If you have a test or a pilot project to try, come with us. We would be happy to make that case study with you. Maybe we can jointly present it, Lucas, in the upcoming session that is coming, not only making this presentation, but giving a test case. So if you have projects, difficult, easy, completed, incomplete, any kind of projects, please bring a case study so that we can demonstrate a good case study. That's number 1. Number 2 is that when we are looking at this from a big picture point of view, what we are trying to help is that we are trying to build the network. That network should also include the specifiers, certifiers. So right now we are doing it because we are kind of studying the program. We are testing the program. Let's say once you and I work together and we establish the knowledge sharing is done, then your team can become part of the review team if they are interested. So from that perspective, regionalization of reviewers is coming. But right now we are just holding that because we are just testing through the process. So in short, we want to localize. In fact, we want to hyper localize.
Thanks, Mahesh.
Yes.
The first questions are about once you get the quantification, you get some guidance to get to zero. Can you explain a little bit more about how's the guidance? And the second question, is it possible to get a zero? It's just like a nice question because
a very nice question.
Yeah, because here we have a particularly market because of our main future fuel based on natural gas. So natural gas for Peru is like something God give us for free. And net zero, is it a complement with natural gas? Can you talk for us about these topics, please?
Yes. First, let's answer the question about after the quantification, do you get some guidance to get zero? So basically, I will rephrase that to say, after you have done the assessment, you do get support through us, through our implementation network. You may have your own team inside. And we have a standard collection of practices and strategies that we have seen repeatedly being used around the world that is available to you to use. But we are happy to intervene and provide it part of our review feedback to consider options. So absolutely, you will get guidance and support, not only from us, from the network. That's first part. Second, getting to zero, particularly with your gift of natural gas. I am going to say that first short answer is yes, you can get to zero. But let's define what zero is for Peru, because it's a big, long pathway to cross. So can we start focusing on reducing the consumption of CNG? Although you may be having the natural gas, can you lower the natural gas utilization? Which means you have to focus on energy efficiency. You have to focus on strategies. You have to reduce your reliance on the natural gas, not just because of emissions reasons, but for economic reasons, for improving the bottom line. So if you move in that direction of getting net zero, and let's optimize the natural gas for Peru first. That's first. Second, alternate energy sources are going to continue to be developed. And that business case will unravel, because at some point of time, you cannot continue using the natural gas because you have got NDC targets. You have made big block energy related to energy efficiency. You have made 30 to 50%. Related to water, you have made 30 to 40%. All these big goals that you have committed as an organization, as a country, to the global platform. So in order for you to be competitive, in order for you to be able to have business with Europe and other related industries, you have to comply to certain international emission related laws. So from that perspective, the reliance on natural gas will automatically come down, or you may have to put offsets to compensate for them, because a net neutrality is a key requirement in the global trade that is coming in the future. And of course, to avoid disruptions to the local marketplace due to climate change and climate related disruptions. So my answer is that before we solve for the big zero, let's try to solve for the small zero. That is to reduce the reliance on CNG and actually create a culture and a community that is less reliant on an emissions driven process by achieving lower consumption and lower efficiencies. So it could be a step towards zero if the conditions are not conducive. The good news is that our program allows that. Our program is not saying that you have to be net zero by tomorrow. It doesn't prescribe. It tells you that, tell me, when will you get to net zero? And I may say, well, I'll never get to net zero, but I'm planning to go and try it and see how far I get to it. Maybe 50%, maybe 55%, maybe 72%. That's a great starting point from zero. So let's get started. Let's keep pushing. And I also think that, is it possible to get to zero? I think the question should be is, why is it not possible to get to zero? And we must try and innovate around that concept. That would be the next goal we can pursue.
Thanks, Mahesh. Yeah, very, very clear. And this is an excellent platform and toolkit to make a path to get net zero. That's exactly what you are trying to tell us now. And thank you. I think people are just very clear with the message. We'll be working with the global net zero in next months, because we are making a huge event, an educational event here in Peru, with the complement of University Científica, and we'll get some more information in the next months, and we'll work with Global Net Zero to have them virtually or physically, I don't know, but this will be a huge event, and we will be pleased to have Mahesh and all his crew here to explain more about the platform, and find all the information in our website here in GBC Peru, and we'll get more information about net zero in future communications in our virtual platforms. So thank you very much, Mahesh and Etrjani, for all your time and explanations and informations, and pleased to have you here. And please give a final message for all the professionals here in this webinar today.
Thank you very much, Lucas, and thanks for all the support from Peru GBC, and we love Peru, so all the good work we can do together will be great. Yes, we will share the presentation, and we'll also share the recording. I think the Peru GBC team will share it with all the constituents who have attended the meeting and who have also not been able to attend the meeting. So we will share everything with the Peru GBC, and they may even do some translation appropriately. I think, Lucas, I'm just assuming you will do some enhancements to the message.
Yes, all the presentation will be recorded, is being recorded and will be presented in the GBC platform. So don't worry. We'll share all the information for all the public that is here now and for all people that will be interested in information for future works and future projects. Thank you, Mahesh, for this webinar, and see you soon. And Esri Jani, thank you very much. And next time I'll practice more your name. Sorry.
Don't worry, don't worry. She's now really going to leave the call.
No, thank you very much, and very pleased to have you both here today. And thanks, Sarah, and all the crew in Global Network Zero. See
Thank
you
you.
next time.
Have a
Thank
wonderful
you.
weekend. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye bye. Thanks. Gracias a todos los amigos presentes. Nos vemos en una siguiente reunión del GBC Perú. Este ha sido nuestro webinar especial en la mañana y nos vamos a ver próximamente en nuestro horario regular de las tardes. Gracias a todos. Nos vemos en una siguiente reunión.